Hello everyone out there, and thanks for joining us for this, our first episode of the new monthly Weirdbox series. This season we intend on bringing you tales of everything that goes bump in the night and in the daylight hours in Scotland. And every episode we will bring you 3 of our favourite spooky stories, facts and folk tales. This first episode is all about one of our favourite Halloween topics, witches. Ooh. That's right, witches are popping up absolutely everywhere these days. From popular movies to creepy local legends. And Scotland has more than its fair share of witchy folklore and word-of-mouth tales on the subject, including plenty of hags, fairies, bogles, and some way more unusual and terrifying things that go bump in the night. The more up-to-date concept of witches only really appears in Scotland from the 16th century onward though, which was round about the time of peak witch hunts that went on to take the lives of thousands of innocent women across Scotland, with the last accused witch death of Janet Horn, who was burned alive, happening in Donnock in 1727. So sit back, relax, and let's learn a little about 3 other witch tales from Scotland now as the 3 icy lads chat about their 3 favourite witches in Scottish history. Let's go. Have you wanted to visit a gorgeous, picturesque coastal village in Scotland with stunning castle ruins, cobbled alleyways, and pebble-strewn beaches that nowhere quite ticks the boxes like Pittenweem, which is only a few hours' drive from Glasgow? You wouldn't know it by looking at it, but Pittenweem has a dark history behind its quaint facade. A history of persecution, false accusations, witchcraft, shady ministers, and of course, murder. In 1704, a teenage boy named Patrick Morton accused 7 women and 1 man of witchcraft after one of the women fell out with a young Patrick who had refused some work for her on the grounds of already having too heavy a workload. That woman was Beatrix Lang, and she was so offended by the rejection that she walked away cursing and threatening revenge. Soon after this, Patrick Morton became gravely ill, and not only had difficulty standing and walking, but he also began having fits and convulsions too, his stomach becoming distended and his body rigid and twisted. Local gossip already had Beatrix earmarked as a witch who had the power of charming and cursing on her side. So throw in a violence-loving local minister called Patrick Cowper, who had a personal gripe with all things he labelled witchcrafty, and a strange hate for strong women, and add a superstitious local populace, and you have the perfect ingredients for a classic witch hunt. The accused witches were soon captured, tortured, and beaten by the minister and the local bailies. They were imprisoned in Pittenweem Tolbooth. A local letter writer at the time stated, "The ministers have used a great deal of barbarous severities to extort confessions from those poor unhappy creatures." After a series of trials, tribulations, a death in confinement, and an actual prison escape aided and abetted by what seems like the only prison guard during all of this that actually had a heart. Even after a not so miraculous healing of the accuser Patrick Morton, who, by this point in the story, was absolutely fucking fine and dandy with no lasting effects after apparently being at death's door earlier, we arrive at this, the final most horrific chapter on the whole sordid affair, the brutal mob death of Janet Cornfoot. After her escape the previous night, Janet Cornfoot made her way to the village of Lookers, 8 miles from Pittenweem, where she was soon discovered by the minister George Gordon, who arranged for an armed guard of 2 men to return her to Pittenweem on the 30th of January 1705. A mob of at least 10 men then forcibly removed her from the house where she was being kept while awaiting the bailies arriving to take her back to the Tolbooth. The mob tied her up, beat her, then hauled her down to the harbour by her ankles, with the intention of dunking her, of course. A rope was run from a ship's mast back to the shore, where she was dangled from it while the crowd threw stones at her as she swung backwards and forwards. When they finally had enough fun, they took her down, where she was then covered by a door that had heavy stones placed on top of it, one at a time, until she was crushed to death. Then, using a horse-drawn cart to run over the rock-strewn door too, to make sure they'd truly finished the job, the crowd left. Even after a trial against those present, no one was ever charged or found guilty of the murder of Janet Cornfoot. The church lied. In March 2012, the local community council invited local residents to vote on a proposal for a memorial piece, with a possible design submitted for a tall metal sculpture in the shape of a door, which would have recalled the method of Cornfoot's murder, with heavy boulders being loaded up on a door which had been placed in her body. The plan was rejected by popular vote. Rumour has it that both the church and some of the local townsfolk banded together and voted the idea down themselves. The church would rather bury the truth of the brutality all those years ago, and the locals? Well, some of them have had families who have lived in Pittenweem for a long time. Say around the 1700s. Make of that what you will. This story may have been told, the Pittenweem witches, but now that I think of it, there was no actual witches here. Just a terrified and suspicious mob whipped up into a brutal fervour by religious zealots within a local church, and a lot of innocent women who found themselves on the wrong side of the local clergy.
Of all the things that Glasgow and its surrounding areas are known for, I think that, as we've described on Weirdbox, and as been the theme of the show so far, is that Glasgow and its surrounding areas are home to the weird and the wonderful, the sometimes supernatural, even. And sometimes those stories cross over into reality. Tonight, I want to talk to you about the Paisley Witches. Now, in Gallow Green, on the west end of Old Paisley, it looked quite different back in the 17th century than it does today. In fact, in June 19... Take two. Gallow Green and the west end of Old Paisley, it looked quite different in the 17th century than it does today. In fact, in June 1697, there was a sight that none that witnessed it would ever have forgotten. The Paisley witches, men, women and children among them, ablaze and tied to stakes after having been strangled, publicly executed for the crime of witchcraft, found guilty of putting a spell on Christian Shaw, the 11-year-old daughter of the then Laird of Barrigan. Now, whatever you think of witches and witchcraft, whether you believe or you don't, this was our attention-seeking child. She described being made to float, to vomit bones and feathers, that stones would appear from parts of her body. Her accused were no more than just, people who worked the land, people who knew how to, cure an ailment with herbs, or, the application of things from the earth, from the woods. But when Catherine Campbell was dragged, kicking and screaming, to her fate, she brought down the wrath of God and the devil himself on the people of Paisley. She spat and she kicked and she cursed the very names of the people that accused her. And some say this cursed the town of Paisley. But they said that she was in league with the devil. Surely they were the ones doing the devil's work. And so, we fast forward through the years. After the witches themselves had been reduced to ash and buried just off the Tannahill. Every single time disaster struck Paisley, it was blamed on the witches and their curse, because the superstition held that the horseshoe, the superstition of the horseshoe that was placed on top of where they're, fuck's sake, the horseshoe the superstition of the horseshoe placed on top of where their ashes had been buried. It was long held that as long as the horseshoe stayed in place, then the curse that the witches had put on the town would abate. And then one day the horseshoe disappeared. And to this day it's never been found. So every single disaster that befell Paisley, the superstitious minded among them, they blamed the witches. And why not? It's an easy thing to do. That's why we have superstitions, is so that we can have something to blame the unexpected, the unfortunate on. And in 2010, the anniversary, the 313th anniversary of the burning, there was a ceremony held in Paisley where councillors and town officials and the town trust laid a wreath at the gallows green where these atrocities had taken place. Not before time. The ancestors of the ancestors of the ancestors of the ancestors, the descendants of the descendants of the descendants, fuck off. Not before time. The descendants of 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 the townspeople who carried out these murders were shown atonement for what our ancestors had done. And so maybe in the town of Paisley, the superstitious could breathe a little easier, could sleep a little deeper, seeing that the source of Paisley's luck, of its bad luck, shit. And so maybe the conscience of Paisley itself was eased. And who knows? Maybe that acknowledgement of what the town had done could help ease the fortunes of the town itself. There's no way of knowing. But if you find yourself in Paisley around dusk at Gallows Green, it can seem like a lonely place. There's a feeling there. A feeling of something trying to speak, something wanting to be heard. And if you listen really closely, you can hear the crackle of the embers. You can get that faint whiff of smoke. And maybe, just maybe, carried on the breeze, you hear Catherine herself cursing the town of Paisley to hell.
One noteworthy case of Scottish witchcraft is that of Isabel Gowdy, noteworthy for the fact that she openly confessed to practising witchcraft on 4 occasions during a 6-week period between April and late May of 1662. Gowdy was from the village of Aldern, near Nairn in the Highlands, and it's thought that during the 6 weeks of interrogations she was held in solitary confinement and likely repeatedly beaten at the toll booth there. Gowdy was likely between 30 and 50 years old at the time of her confessions, though little is known about her life. What we do know is that she and several others accused of witchcraft in the area were at odds with a local minister called Harry Forbes, who bore witness to each of Gowdy's 4 confessions. Forbes was by all accounts a fundamentalist and particularly despised those thought to be engaged in witchcraft. Indeed, it's thought that at least part of the reason for Gowdy's confessions was a desire to annoy Forbes. Among the things Gowdy confessed to in her first interrogation in mid-April 1662 were making a pact with the devil, who she claimed laid his mark on her shoulder before drinking blood from the area. She also made claim that she and a number of others had sex with the devil, who was described as being extremely cold to touch, having cloven hooved feet and pitch black skin. Gowdy claimed these troublemakers exhumed the body of a dead child and spoiled crops, that she and her co-accused, including a lady named Janet Breadhead, practised magic and observed the witches' Sabbath. She went on to claim the coven to which she, Breadhead, and another called Margaret Brodie belonged spent time dining at the home of the so-called Queen of Fairies, whose house on Downey Hill was also attended by the mythical Tarvishka, or Waterbill, which she claimed freaked her out. She also mentioned putting a spell of hard effigies, clay effigies, I believe, and transforming into a jackdaw. She also detailed how she tricked her husband, disguising her nighttime absence by laying a broom at his side in bed. At Gowdy's second session, a couple of weeks later, she dished more detail on the coven and its members, as well as her servant spirit, which she called the Red Reaver, and that she claimed waited on her at the banquets the coven attended. Information about chants and spells was turned over also, such as those required for turning people into animals. Robert Pitcairn, a historian, wrote one of these chants in Ancient Criminal Trials in Scotland, released in 1833, which reportedly went as follows: I shall go into a here, with sorrow and sick and meikle care, and I shall go in the devil's name, aye while I come home again. Pitcairn later writes that to change back, she would say, Here, here, God send thee care. I am in a hare's likeness now, but I shall be in a woman's likeness even now. In addition, according to Gowdy, the devil crafted elf arrows to be used by the witches in the devil's name. These arrows were reported to kill the targets instantly when they successfully hit, which, thankfully, they didn't often do. She also made reference to spells intended specifically to make Forbes suffer. Later that month, Gowdy's third confession occurred, at which she reiterated her pact with the devil, which she claimed she made at Aldearn Kirk late one night alongside Breadhead, Brodie, and others. She would then offer the names of those killed by her and other members of the coven's elf arrows, for which she expressed remorse. During this interrogation, she made reference to the devil issuing beatings to witches in the coven and also described what his dick looked like. At her final confession, the crimes of Gowdy and her co-accused were summarised in Forbes and another minister interrogator called Hugh Rose, as well as public notary John Innes, and around a dozen others collected more detail on who else might be involved. This led, according to Pitcairn, to 41 total arrests. Now, the result of this trial is unknown. It wouldn't have been surprising for Gowdy to have been executed for witchcraft, though no record of this exists. Pitcairn and most other Scottish historians believe this is the most likely outcome, however. Whatever became of Isabel Gowdy after those 6 weeks in spring and early summer 1662, though, one thing's for certain. Her place in Scottish folklore as the Queen of Witches is assured. Her detailed and often exhaustive testimony serving as the best existing evidence of witchcraft in Scotland and the forms it took.